Welcome, dear readers, to the first issue of the Bored Sphinx. In a world often dominated by loud clamor and superficial truths, we aim to be a place of reflection and deep contemplation. We seek to make audible the whispers in the silence, to amplify the quiet voices that often go unheard, and to uncover the hidden connections that shape our world. My name is Imukara Winter, and like many of you, I lost the unspeakable during the night of silence. This tragedy, which tore apart so many families and left countless questions in its wake, has set me upon a path of seeking truth, no matter how painful it may be. The Bored Sphinx is the result of this quest, a vessel for the voices of those who thirst for answers. We live in a time of transformation. The Nefrosphäre, once an isolated phenomenon, inexorably extends its influence. Nephron's power grows, and with it, the fear and uncertainty in people's hearts. Old certainties fade, and we find ourselves forced to question the very foundations of our society. In this issue, we dare to ask some of these pressing questions. What truly happens within the Nefrosphäre? What are Nephron's goals? And what role do the Shimmer Wanderers play in his plan? How does the growing threat affect Arkon's political fabric? And what alliances are being forged to withstand the looming storm? Our editors, each an expert in their field, will attempt to bring light to this darkness. Quentin, Sa-Tiq, our chief editor, will illuminate the hidden games of the powerful with his unparalleled knowledge of Arkon's power structures. Wikka Gershwin will uncover the political machinations and intrigues that thrive in the Nefrosphere's shadow. Solvaar Weinkeller will help us understand the phenomena shaping our world through his scientific analyses. And Hashir will show us the human side of this crisis through his reports from daily life. The Bored Sphinx is more than just a newspaper. It is a promise that we will never cease asking questions, that we will not be content with simple answers, and that we will seek the truth regardless of where it leads us. The night of silence may have taken our most beloved from us, but it also left us something valuable, an unshakable will to find the truth. Let us together listen to these whispers in the silence and fathom the secrets of Arkon. With thoughtful regards, Imukara Winter.
The Throne Mountain, Guardian or Predator, by Quentin Sa-Tiq. In the fading light of dusk, the Himmelskrone hangs above Throne Mountain like a terrible promise. Its floating masses of interconnected bäumlings cast shadows that dance across the ancient stone below, while within its depths the Shimmer Lords conduct their inscrutable business. For centuries, this arrangement has persisted, the mountain below, the crown above, and between them a tangled web of loyalty, obligation, and secrets that stretches back to the time of the Twin Kings. But what truly binds these two landmarks together? And more importantly, what binds them to us? Through months of careful investigation and interviews with sources both within the Ruthkirche and the Academy of Knowledge, a disturbing pattern emerges. The Himmelskrone's presence above Throne Mountain is no accident of geography or convenience. It is, according to ancient texts I've been permitted to examine, a form of penance. The Shimmer Lords watch over the mountain not out of benevolence, explains a former priest of the Ruthkirche, who spoke on condition of anonymity. They watch because they must, because they owe a debt written in blood. The story begins with the twin kings of House Agmar, Aldric and Edric, whose tragic tale is well known, but perhaps not well understood. Historical records suggest that the Shimmer Lords' involvement in that ancient crisis was far more complex than commonly believed. Their attempts to help during a particularly virulent outbreak of the Shimmer sickness led to catastrophic losses of life, losses that some suggest were not entirely accidental. But why maintain this vigil for centuries? What power does Throne Mountain hold that requires such eternal observation? The mountain itself offers few answers. Its weather-worn faces remain impassive, its caves sealed by royal decree. The Amuni guards who patrol its lower slopes speak of strange lights in the higher reaches, of whispers that carry on the wind even when the air is still. They talk of shadows that move against the light, of voices that speak in languages no living tongue can reproduce. More troubling are the reports from the scattered settlements near the mountain's base. In Bealni, villagers speak of children who wake in the night, their eyes fixed on the Himmelskroner above. In Tira, merchants tell tales of strange dreams shared by dozens of citizens on the same night, dreams of floating cities and singing trees. The Academy of Knowledge maintains that the Himmelskron's presence serves a vital regulatory function, helping to stabilize the flow of shimmer-radiation in the region. Yet their own records show significant variations in these patterns, variations that seem to follow no natural or predictable rhythm. The Crown watches the mountain, yes, says another source, a senior researcher at the Academy who requested anonymity. But perhaps it's more accurate to say the mountain watches back. Recent events lend credence to this unsettling perspective. The frequency of shimmer storms in the region has increased markedly over the past decade. The patterns of these storms, when mapped, form concentric circles around Throne Mountain, circles that some say resemble an enormous eye. The Ruthkirche's official position remains unchanged. The Himmelskroner serves as a neutral meeting ground, a place where the great powers of our world can gather to maintain the delicate balance that keeps peace in our lands. Yet even within the Church, whispers of doubt have begun to circulate. As night falls and the Himmelskron's shadow lengthens across the land, one cannot help but wonder, are we witnessing a guardian at its eternal post, or a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The truth, as with so many things in our world, likely lies somewhere in between, in the shadows cast by floating cities, in the whispers carried on the wind, in the dreams that come to us in the darkest hours of the night. The Bored Sphinx will continue to investigate this matter. Those with information about unusual activities around Throne Mountain or the Himmelskron are encouraged to contact us through our usual channels. Discretion, as always, is assured. This article was reviewed by the Academy of Knowledge and approved for publication under Statute 7 of the Luminous Accord.
The Shimmer Sickness Conspiracy. What did the Searchers Guild know? By Wikka Gershwin. The archives of Ignitia hold many secrets, but few are as troubling as the sudden dissolution of the Searchers Guild in 2973 NDR. For nearly a century, these brave men and women scoured the continent, seeking the mysterious plant believed to cause the shimmer sickness. Then, without warning or explanation, the Academy of Knowledge terminated their mission and disbanded the guild. Why? The official explanation cited resource reallocation and shifting priorities. But my investigation suggests something far more disturbing. The searchers may have found exactly what they were looking for. Through interviews with former guild members and careful examination of surviving documents, a pattern emerges. In the months leading up to their dissolution, several search parties reported unusual findings in the remote regions of Imukara. These reports, now mysteriously absent from official records, spoke of a peculiar correlation between shimmer sickness outbreaks and certain geological formations. We were getting close to something, says a former searcher who requested anonymity for fear of reprisal. The patterns were too precise to be coincidental. Then came the order to stop all investigations. Just like that, Decades of research gone. But what did they find? The few surviving fragments of their final reports hint at a discovery that challenged everything we thought we knew about the shimmer sickness. References to living light and conscious radiation appear repeatedly, though always in contexts too damaged or redacted to fully understand. More telling is what happened to those who asked too many questions. Of the 12 senior guild members who protested the dissolution, 9 disappeared within the year. The remaining 3 took vows of silence and joined remote monasteries. Their families, when approached for this article, refused to speak on record. The Academy's response to these events raises further questions. In the same year the Guild was dissolved, funding for the Department of Theoretical Radiation increased tenfold. New security measures were implemented around certain research facilities, and several wings of the Academy's library were permanently sealed. The timing wasn't coincidental, suggests another former Guild member, speaking from exile in Solemn. We found something they wanted buried, something that challenged the official narrative about shimmer sickness. Perhaps most disturbing are the rumors concerning Bartosz the Restless, one of the Guild's most dedicated members. His brother's execution for attempting to steal Amun's crown jewels has long been considered a simple case of theft. But why would a respected Guild member, with no history of criminal behavior, suddenly attempt such a brazen crime? Recently uncovered documents suggest Bartosz had been investigating a connection between ancient crown jewels and shimmer sickness transmission. Was his brother's theft actually an attempted investigation? And what happened to Bartosz's research notes after his brother's execution? The Academy of Knowledge dismisses such speculation as dangerous conspiracy theories, yet they have never adequately explained why an organization as successful and well-funded as the Searchers Guild was dissolved at the height of its activities. As shimmer sickness continues to claim victims across Arkon, the questions the Searchers asked become increasingly relevant. What did they discover in those remote regions? Why was their research terminated so abruptly? And most importantly, what truths about shimmer sickness remain hidden from public view? The Bored Sphinx will continue investigating this matter. Those with information about the Searchers Guild or its final discoveries are encouraged to contact us through secure channels. Your anonymity will be protected.
Editor's note. The Academy of Knowledge has reviewed this article as required by law. All statements have been verified as speculative in nature and do not constitute claims of factual evidence against any institution.
The Silent Hour, a legacy of the unknown. By Imukara Winter. The wind still carries their footsteps. Even now, 51 years after the night of silence, I sometimes wake in the dark hours before dawn, convinced I can hear them. The soft, inexorable sound of thousands of feet moving through the streets of Belny, my childhood home. The shuffle of leather on stone, the whisper of fabric, the absolute absence of voices. I was only 7 when it happened. Young enough to be terrified, old enough to remember every detail with the cruel clarity that trauma brings, the way my father's eyes suddenly went blank in the middle of our evening meal. How my mother's hand froze in the act of reaching for the bread. The terrible stillness that fell over our home, broken only by the sound of chairs scraping back as they rose in unison and walked out the door. They never looked back. None of them did. In every town, in every village across Arkon, the same scene played out. Thousands of people suddenly struck mute, began walking toward the Nefrosphäre. They didn't stop to gather provisions. They didn't respond to the cries of their children or the pleas of those left behind. They simply walked, their faces turned toward the shimmering horizon, their eyes fixed on something none of us could see. The Academy of Knowledge has spent decades studying the event. Their theories range from mass hysteria to atmospheric anomalies, from shimmer-radiation surges to collective psychic phenomena. Yet none of these explanations account for the precision of the event, the way it struck simultaneously across the continent, or the fact that those affected seemed to share a common purpose. There was intention behind it, says Dr. Myra Vost, a researcher at the Academy who has spent her career studying the phenomenon. The affected individuals didn't just wander aimlessly. They moved with purpose, following specific routes that, when mapped, formed distinct patterns. These patterns, she explains, resembled the nerve structures of living organisms, as if the continent itself had become a vast nervous system, with the Nefrosphäre as its central point. Most of those who began the walk never reached their destination. They died of exposure, of thirst, of exhaustion. Those few who were forcibly restrained wasted away, refusing food and water until they, too, passed. The lucky ones, though some would argue whether survival could be called luck, were those close enough to the Nefrosphäre to reach it before their bodies gave out. What happened to them after they entered the shimmering wastes remains a matter of speculation. Some say they were absorbed into Nephron's army of shimmer wanderers. Others claim they achieved some sort of transcendence, becoming one with the shimmer radiation they sought so desperately. The truth, if it exists, remains buried in the shifting sands of the Nefrosphäre. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the night of silence isn't what we know about it. It's what we don't know. Why did it happen? What force could possess such power over the minds of so many? And most importantly, could it happen again? The Academy assures us that such an event is unlikely to recur. They point to new monitoring systems, early warning networks, protective measures put in place in the decades since. Yet in the depths of night, when the wind whispers through empty streets, one cannot help but wonder, are we any better prepared now than we were then? Those of us who survived that night carry its legacy in different ways. Some refuse to speak of it. Others, like myself, cannot stop speaking of it, cannot stop searching for answers in the shadows of that terrible silence. The footsteps I hear in the night might be memories, or perhaps they're warnings. Either way, they remind us that there are forces in our world we barely understand, powers that can reach into our minds and turn us into willing puppets. The night of silence may be 51 years behind us, but its questions echo still, and until we find answers, none of us can truly rest easy in our beds. This article is dedicated to the memory of Karan and Lyra Winter, who walked into the silence and never returned.
The Unseen Legacy. Why Are There No Click Geisler? By Solvaar, Weinkeller. The question has puzzled scholars for generations. Why, among all the sapient species of Arkon, are the clicks alone in never producing Geisler? The termer manifests them regularly. Even the rare Morglow Geisler has been documented. Yet in all our recorded history, not a single click has ever achieved this state of enlightenment. This absence becomes more perplexing when we consider our shared ancestry with the termer. Both clicks and termer descended from the Urgreifers, those ancient beings who once dwelt along the shores of the Udar Sea. Our evolutionary paths diverged when some ventured into the caves of Skafandar, while others adapted to the plains of Imazgar. But why should this geographical division result in such a fundamental spiritual difference? Through careful analysis of historical records and extensive interviews with both Sauls and Scaffs, I have identified several potential factors that may contribute to this phenomenon. Each deserves careful consideration. First, consider our physical adaptation to subterranean life. The caves of Skafandar shaped us profoundly, giving us our characteristic hard shells and our ability to navigate in near total darkness. Did this physical adaptation somehow affect our spiritual capacity? Several Academy scholars have proposed that our shells might interfere with the absorption of shimmer-radiation in ways that prevent the transformation into Geistler state. However, this theory fails to account for our demonstrated ability to interact with shimmer in other ways. The Soul's expertise in shimmer mining and the Scoff's successful shimmer weapon development prove that we can perceive and manipulate shimmer radiation effectively. A second hypothesis concerns our mental adaptation to cave life. The development of highly organized, hierarchical social structures was crucial for survival in the underground environment. Did this rigid thinking somehow make us resistant to the kind of spiritual awakening necessary for Geistler transformation? Yet this explanation also proves unsatisfactory. The Morglos, with their equally structured society, still produce Geistler. Furthermore, the Souls have developed more flexible social structures since leaving Skafandar, yet still produce no Geistler. A third possibility, and one I find most intriguing, relates to our species' unique relationship with space and dimensionality. Living in caves requires an intricate understanding of three-dimensional space, far more complex than surface navigation. Our ancestors developed specialized neural structures to process this spatial information, structures that persist in modern clicks. Could these neural adaptations somehow interfere with the mental state required for Geistler transformation? Recent research at the Academy suggests that Geistler consciousness involves perception of what some scholars term extra-dimensional space. Perhaps our highly specialized spatial processing makes us inherently resistant to such perceptions. But the most troubling hypothesis emerged during my interviews with elderly souls in the free city of Solum. Several mentioned an ancient legend passed down through generations about a time when Click Geistler did exist. According to these tales, something happened during our early cave-dwelling period, something so catastrophic that it permanently altered our species' spiritual capacity. The details vary between accounts, but certain elements remain consistent. A great catastrophe in the deepest caves, a choice made by our ancestors, and a price paid that continues to affect us today. Unfortunately, no historical records from this period survive to verify these stories. The Academy dismisses such tales as folklore, but I find myself returning to them repeatedly. If there is truth in these legends, what price did our ancestors pay? And more importantly, was it truly permanent? Some of my colleagues suggest that this line of inquiry is dangerous, that perhaps our inability to produce Geistler serves some vital purpose in the natural order. They point to the stability of clique societies compared to other species, arguing that what we perceive as a limitation might actually be a strength. Yet I cannot accept this complacent view. Understanding why we lack this capacity might be the first step toward reclaiming it, if such reclamation is possible or even advisable. My research continues, though not without opposition. Recently, several promising leads regarding ancient cave systems in southern Skafandar were suddenly declared off-limits by local authorities. Equipment has gone missing from my laboratory, and certain historical documents I had been studying disappeared from the Academy archives. Such obstacles only convince me further that this mystery deserves investigation. I call upon any readers with information about ancient click histories, particularly those regarding the early cave-dwelling period, to contact me through the Bored Sphinx's secure channels. The truth of our spiritual silence may lie buried in those ancient depths, and despite whatever forces wish it to remain hidden, I intend to uncover it.
Editor's note. The Academy of Knowledge has reviewed this article and notes that some theories presented are speculative in nature. Readers are encouraged to consult official Academy publications for verified information about shimmer-radiation and species differentiation. Editorial note. The following article was submitted by Hashir Reed as part of his internship application. We were struck by his ability to find profound truths in a simple tavern tale, revealing how the Nefrosphäre transforms not just bodies, but souls. His talent for capturing both the physical and psychological dimensions of life at the edge of the shimmering waste earned him the position.
The Forgotten Wanderers, A Tale from the Edge of the Nefrosphäre, by Hashir Reed. The Desert Rose Tavern crouches at the edge of the Nefrosphäre like a weathered sentinel, its walls stained by countless shimmer storms. Inside, the air smells of spiced tea and tired travelers, and everyone speaks in whispers, as if afraid to disturb the shifting sands beyond the walls. It was here I met Jira, an ancient Morglow guide whose sand mask has been scarred by decades of leading travelers through the shimmering wastes. His voice, when he finally agreed to speak with me, carried the rough texture of sand-scoured stone. "You want to know about the foolish ones?" he asked, his yellow eyes gleaming in the tavern's dim light. "The heroes who thought they could master the Nefrosphäre with nothing but courage and greed." He told me of a group he encountered 3 months ago, 5 young adventurers, their eyes bright with dreams of fortune. They had heard the tales of air serpent teeth, those crystalline fangs that never lose their shimmer charge, worth a fortune to the right buyer. Like so many before them, they thought themselves clever enough, strong enough to succeed where others had failed. "They had maps," Jira said, his laugh like grinding glass. "Maps, as if the Nefrosphäre's paths stay fixed long enough to draw them. They had water skins and dried meat and clever little compasses that spun uselessly in the shimmer-radiation. What they didn't have was sense." Despite his warnings about the futility of hunting air serpents without proper preparation, despite his offers to guide them for a reasonable fee, they insisted on proceeding alone. "The shimmer-radiation was low that day," he recalled. "It made them cocky. They couldn't understand that the Nefrosphäre's calm is more dangerous than its storms." He followed them, of course. It's what the best guides do. Shadow the foolish ones from a distance, ready to help when their confidence finally breaks against the reality of the shimmering wastes. But this time was different. "The storm came from nowhere," Jira said, his fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on his teacup. "Not a normal storm with its curtains of glowing sand. This was something else. The air itself seemed to crystallize. I found them scattered across the dunes like broken dolls, their bodies already starting to sink into the sand." He could only carry one. The choice haunts him still. 5 lives balanced on his conscience, and only enough strength to save a single soul. He chose the youngest, a girl barely into her womanhood, her face already bearing the gray pallor of shimmer sickness. "I tried to return for the others," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "But you know how the Nefrosphäre is. The landmarks had shifted, the dunes had moved. Where I had left 4 people, there was nothing but empty sand." The girl he saved recovered at the Desert Rose, under Grallow's care. But when she was strong enough to speak, her words brought no comfort. She spoke of lights in the storm that moved with purpose, of voices that whispered promises too beautiful to resist. She spoke of her companions walking into the crystalline air with their arms outstretched, their faces transformed by rapture. They're still out there, Jira insisted, though whether he meant alive or dead, he wouldn't say. The Nefrosphäre doesn't just kill, it transforms, it preserves. Sometimes on the worst nights, I think I hear their voices in the wind. When I asked what they say, he shook his head and would speak no more. I've heard many tales in my time at the Desert Rose, but something about Jira's story rings with a truth deeper than mere facts. The Nefrosphäre is not simply a hostile environment to be conquered or survived. It is something alive, something aware, something that watches the proud and foolish with patient, hungry eyes. The air serpent teeth still gleam in treasure hunters' dreams. The crystalline storms still dance across the dunes. And somewhere in that shimmering waste, 4 adventurers walk on through an endless storm, their faces transformed by rapture, their voices joining the whispers in the wind.
Editor's note. The Bored Sphinx reminds its readers that unauthorized expeditions into the Nefrosphäre are extremely dangerous and strictly regulated by law. Those wishing to explore the region should contact only licensed guides through official channels. The Nature of Shimmer-Radiation, Theories and Speculations. Transcript of a lecture by Professor Eldrin Faelar, Academy of Knowledge, Department of Theoretical Radiation. Recorded with permission in the Grand Lecture Hall, Ignatia.
And so we come to the fundamental question that has puzzled scholars since the founding of our institution. What precisely is shimmer radiation? We know its effects, certainly. We can measure its intensity, map its flows, even store it in properly prepared shimmer stones. We have built an entire civilization upon its utility. Yet the true nature of this force continues to elude our greatest minds. Consider the paradox of its behavior in the Nefrosphäre. Conventional physical laws suggest that radiation should dissipate with distance from its source. Yet shimmer radiation appears to follow specific channels, what we term streams, that maintain their intensity over vast distances. These streams demonstrate patterns that defy our understanding of natural phenomena. More puzzling still is the radiation's apparent response to conscious observation. My colleagues in the Department of Practical Applications have documented numerous cases where shimmer radiation patterns altered in response to the mere presence of observers. This has led some to suggest that consciousness itself might be a fundamental property of the radiation.
Murmuring from the audience.
Please remain calm. I am not suggesting anything that contradicts our established understanding. I merely point out that our understanding remains incomplete. Take, for example, the curious case of the Morglos. Their ability to process shimmer radiation as sustenance defies our current models of biological energy conversion. Yet we cannot deny the evidence of their existence. Something in their physiology, something that evolved naturally, allows them to accomplish what our most advanced technology cannot replicate. This brings us to the 3 primary theories currently debated within the Academy. First, the wave theory, which suggests that shimmer radiation is a previously unknown form of energy that interacts with both physical matter and consciousness through wave mechanics. This would explain its ability to affect both material objects and mental states. Second, the dimensional boundary theory, which proposes that shimmer radiation is actually a manifestation of interactions between our reality and adjacent possibilities. This theory is particularly popular among those studying the phenomenon of Geistler manifestation. And third, the unified field theory, which suggests that shimmer radiation is not a distinct force at all, but rather our limited perception of a more fundamental aspect of reality itself.
Interruption from the audience. Question unclear in recording.
No, I am not authorized to discuss the luminous accord or its implications for this research. Those matters are beyond the scope of this lecture.
Another interruption, followed by sounds of commotion.
Perhaps we should move on to more practical matters. The measurement of shimmer radiation intensity through crystalline matrices has shown considerable promise in recent experiments. By calibrating the resonance frequency of processed shimmer stone.
Recording ends abruptly. Editor's note. The remainder of this lecture was deemed unsuitable for publication by the Academy Review Board. The Bored Sphinx thanks Professor Faelar for permission to print this excerpt and reminds readers that all theories presented are speculative in nature.
The Call of the Shimmer by Anya Talira. Read by Wikka Gershwin. The shimmer speaks in colors that have no names. Mira first noticed them 3 days ago, threading through the corners of her vision like spider silk. She tried to ignore them, the way everyone in Bialni learns to ignore the strange lights that sometimes dance above Throne Mountain. But these colors followed her, whispering in voices that tasted like metal and dreaming. Her mother noticed when she stopped eating. The food has no light in it. Mira tried to explain, but the words came out wrong, twisted by the new geometry blooming behind her eyes. How could she describe the way normal food had become flat, empty, while the air itself sparkled with sustenance? They sent for the healers, of course, but Mira could see the truth, written in the strange patterns that flickered around their heads as they examined her. They knew what this was. Everyone knew what this was. They simply didn't want to say it aloud, as if naming the shimmer sickness might summon it into their own bodies. The quarantine room they put her in had walls painted with symbols meant to contain shimmer radiation. But Mira could see how useless they were, could watch the colors seep through the cracks in reality that the symbols couldn't touch. The colors brought dreams with them, dreams of vast cities built from crystallized time, of gardens where thoughts bloomed like flowers, of a place where the very air would welcome her home. When the guards changed shifts, she could see the shimmer radiation flowing through their bodies like rivers of light. The healthy ones showed only thin streams, barely visible. But Dren, the night guard, blazed like a constellation. He had it too, though he didn't know it yet. She watched the colors growing brighter in him night after night, wondering if her own transformation had been as beautiful to watch. They brought priests to pray over her, scholars to study her, even a masked Morglow who pressed cool fingers against her temples and whispered words in a language that made the colors dance. But none of them understood. The shimmer wasn't a sickness at all. It was an awakening. On the 7th night, while Dren's light rivaled the moon's outside her window, Mira heard the song. It came from the direction of the Nefrosphäre, a melody that moved through the spectrum of impossible colors like wind through leaves. The walls of her room had become transparent, insubstantial as dreams. Beyond them, she could see others rising from their beds, their bodies trailing coronas of light as they turned toward the song. Dren was the first to move, his keys falling forgotten from suddenly slack fingers. Mira followed him through the ghost walls, into streets that rippled with ribbons of impossible light. Others were there too, dozens of them, their bodies glowing like constellations as they walked with dreamlike purpose toward the waiting horizon. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The song said everything, about transformation, about belonging, about a place where the colors had names, and the air itself was alive with meaning. Their feet moved in perfect unison, marking time to a rhythm that pulsed through the fabric of reality itself. Behind them, she could hear shouting, crying, the sounds of the unchanged world trying to hold on to what it was losing. But those sounds seemed to come from very far away, from a place where colors were simple things that could be captured in words, where air was just air, and reality was solid and unchangeable. A child ran beside her for a while, tugging at her sleeve, begging her to come home. Mira wanted to explain that she was going home, that she was finally going home. But when she turned to look at the child, she saw only another pattern of light, beautiful but irrelevant, as a dream upon waking. The colors grew brighter as they walked, the song deeper and richer with every step. Reality flickered around them like a candle in wind, sometimes solid, sometimes as insubstantial as thought. Mira watched her own hands phase in and out of existence, fascinated by the way light replaced flesh, the way consciousness expanded to fill the spaces left behind. The shimmering waste stretched before them, a sea of possibilities waiting to be born. In its depths, she could see shapes moving, vast and patient as planets, their thoughts rolling like thunder through the spectrum of unnamed colors. They were waiting, these ancient ones, waiting to welcome their children home. Somewhere in the unchanged world, she knew, people would speak of this night in whispers. They would count the empty beds, the abandoned posts, the doors left hanging open in the dawn. They would blame the shimmer sickness, call it a tragedy, search for cures and preventions and explanations that fit their limited understanding of reality. But Mira knew better now. She knew that the shimmer sickness wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Not a death, but a transformation. Not a tragedy, but a homecoming. The colors have names in the place where she's going. The air has purpose. Reality itself is nothing but a dream, being dreamed by something vast and beautiful. And finally, awake. One step at a time, Mira walks into the waiting light. Behind her, the unchanged world fades like a forgotten dream. Before her, the colors sing their welcome, and every step takes her closer to home.
Letters to the editor. The truth about shimmer sickness. To the esteemed editors of the Bored Sphinx, I write regarding your recent distribution of preview chapters discussing the shimmer sickness. As a former herbalist who spent 20 years studying unusual plant patterns in the regions surrounding shimmer sickness outbreaks, I feel compelled to share an observation. There appears to be a correlation between cases of shimmer sickness and the presence of certain luminescent vegetation. While I cannot name specific species without risking Academy censure, I believe this avenue of research deserves further investigation. Veiled herbalist, Ignacia. Editor's note: while we appreciate our correspondent's enthusiasm, we remind readers that unauthorized botanical research related to shimmer sickness falls under Academy oversight. A voice from the Nefrosphäre. Honored Sphinx, your preview pages reached us even here, at the edges of Nephron's domain. Many dismiss the Nefrosphäre as a wasteland of death and madness, but there is beauty here that defies description. Yes, the sand-filled air burns in untrained lungs. Yes, the shimmer-radiation can drive the unprepared to madness, but there is also the dance of the air serpents against the perpetual twilight sky, the crystalline songs of the windmills, the deep peace that comes from accepting one's true nature. I was once like your readers, afraid of what the shimmer might do to me. Now I understand it was not a curse, but a calling. Lysandra, former scholar of Ignitia, currently residing in Quodar. Questions about the throne. Editors, the Academy claims the Himmelskrone's presence above Throne Mountain serves to stabilize shimmer-radiation patterns. Yet my own observations suggest the opposite. Shimmer storms appear to intensify in frequency and strength the closer one gets to the mountain. Perhaps it's time someone questioned the official narrative. Anonymous from Bielny. A warning. To the reckless fools at the Bored Sphinx, your probing into matters best left undisturbed will bring nothing but suffering. Some truths are hidden for a reason. Cease your investigations immediately, or face the consequences. A concerned citizen in defense of Nephron. Most enlightened editors, your preview materials suggest a bias against our Lord Nephron and the perfect order he brings to the Nefrosphäre. You speak of control and domination when you should speak of guidance and protection. How many shimmer wanderers has he saved from death in the wastes? How many lost souls has he given purpose? Before you judge what you do not understand, come see the truth for yourselves. Our doors are always open to those who seek genuine understanding. Zarahet Nuth, Diplomatic Corps of the Nefrosphäre. Morglow Perspective. Your publication has caught the attention of the Naku priests. While we appreciate your attempt to understand the mysteries of our world, remember that not all truths are meant for all eyes. Proceed with wisdom. Editor's note. The above letters were received in response to preview chapters of our inaugural issue, which were distributed to selected readers across Arkon. We are heartened by the thoughtful and passionate responses, even those that disagree with our mission. We encourage all readers to share their thoughts, experiences, and perspectives on the articles published in this and future issues. Letters may be delivered to our offices in Ignitia, sent through any reputable messenger service, or left with trusted merchants who stock our publication. While we cannot guarantee publication of all correspondence, we will endeavor to present a representative selection of voices in each issue. For those concerned about discretion, we maintain strict protocols to protect our correspondents' identities. Anonymous submissions will be considered if their content warrants publication. Please note that by submitting a letter, you grant the Bored Sphinx permission to edit for length and clarity, while maintaining the essence of your message.